The 25th, 1991, and our guest is Robert Miller. All right, Mr. Miller, where do you live today?
Florida, New York.
All right, how long have you lived there?
Oh, 10 years.
All right. And we're going to be going into later that you were in the 82nd Airborn during World War II.
Right.
All right. Where were you born?
New York City.
All right, and you'll have to tell us the year if you would.
1923.
1923. All right. And your parents' name?
John Miller and Henrietta Miller.
All right. And where were they born? If you
In the United States.
in the United States. Did you know your grandparents?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about them, if you would?
Well, both my grandfathers were rabbis. They both died. Both my grandfathers died. One died in the latter part of 1938, 37. My maternal grandfather died right after Pearl Harbor, because I remember having fun with him one day and saying, you know, we're at war, and that when we came home that night, we heard that the Japs had attacked Pearl Harbor.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe you had a little premonition there.
Well, it was awful close. You knew it was coming.
Is it unusual to have two grandfathers as rabbis?
Well, it's not that it's unusual. They were both Orthodox, and I guess that's the way it wound up. You know, my mother, when she met my father's name was John, and on the first date, my youngest uncle ran home and told my grandfather that she was going with a goy.
And the goy is?
Christian.
Christian.
Because my father's first name was John. And he couldn't believe that a Jewish man was named John.
The language spoken at home?
English.
Any Yiddish at all, or?
My grandmothers both spoke Yiddish. Both my grandfathers spoke English. One of them was born in this country.
And you were able to pick up, I assume, some Yiddish, some phrases
certain phrases and maxims.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I was able to talk Yiddish as a child, but over the years not using it.
How often that happens in America.
That's right.
That it's lost. And what did your father do for a living?
Oh, he was a jack of all trades. Let's see, when I was a kid, he drove a truck more or less, and then went into the gasoline station business. And then when I went into the service, of course, you couldn't exist being in the gasoline business because of rationing.
Mm-hmm.
So he went back into trucking and delivered wines and whiskeys right up until I came out almost, and then went back into the gasoline station business. And then in the middle 50s went into a luncheonette business in New York City.
And your mother, would we call her a homemaker?
My mother was a homemaker, except during the war years she worked for the post office in the United Parcel building.
As many women did get into the war effort.
Yeah.
What's the oldest person you can kind of recall as a child? You remember the name, or maybe how old they were?
Well, my grandfather Max died. He was 81.
And how old were you when he died, roughly? Roughly.
17, 16.
All right, but you've known him since,
Oh, yeah.
And when did he die?
1942.
1942. Okay, so he really goes back into the preceding
Oh, yeah.
century.
Well, my father was born in 1898. My mother was born in 1900. I have an aunt that's still alive on my father's side who's 98 years old now.
So you come from a family of reasonably
Seems like it, yeah.
good people, right? What school, what's the elementary school did you attend?
I went to PS 36 in New York. And
Now, where would that be? In New
9th
York?
Street between Avenue C and Avenue D.
Is that still down there, do you know?
I don't know.
Well, you know, because some of them have vanished to
Yeah.
exist, and others, of course, long gone.
The junior high school I went to was 64. My father went to that school, had the same teacher that I had for typing, he had for math.
All right. Then, when did you graduate from high school?
I never graduated from high
Okay.
school.
All right, when did you leave then?
I left high school in 1939.
Did the Depression hit you right between the eyes?
Yeah, I had to go to work.
All right. And let's start off from there. What was your first job?
My first job was in 1936 in the summertime in a gas station for $1.50 an hour, a day,
Yeah.
for 12 hours. Almost made
Was
a
this
mistake.
pumping gas?
Just pumping gas, checking oil.
1936?
Yeah.
Did you have to wear a white uniform?
No.
No? So many of these people.
Gray coveralls.
Gray coverall.
Yeah.
And how much was gas a gallon in 1936?
12 cents, 13 cents,
And specials would even be.
a penny more.
Right. Okay, I wanted to ask, as the childhood, there were many people looking for these jobs, and you were, I guess, we could call it fortunate to have that job. All right. And did you live at home for
Yes.
for a length of time?
I lived at home up until I went into the service.
Did you go to the New York World's Fair?
Oh yeah, I worked at the World's Fair
Well,
in
tell us.
1940.
All
I
right.
worked at Billy Rose's Aquacade.
All right, and you must have seen Esther.
Eleanor Home.
Oh, well, go ahead. Eleanor Home was
Eleanor Home and Buster Crabbe.
All right, well, help us out. Eleanor Home was.
Billy Rose's ex-wife.
Okay, but she wasn't the.
She was a swimming star.
Well, she was. I had forgotten that.
She was a swimming
I was thinking, who was the other one that came along? Esther Williams.
Well, that was
Much later.
much later.
Okay, that's right. Billy Rose. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, that was quite a thing.
It was it really was a beautiful show, and you had to see it to believe it.
All right, Mr. Miller, what were? You know, of course, you're a young boy at the time. You know, or a young man really. What did you do?
I sold peanuts, candy, popcorn, and it was strictly commission.
Oh, it was strictly commission.
Yeah, it was 15 cents on a dollar
All right.
is what the commission was. But considering the times, I made a lot of money those 2 years. I think I averaged about $45 or $50 a week, which was a lot of
That
money.
was a lot of money, because I know a good income at this time was $25 a week.
That's
and
right.
That was a you know, a
That was
decent
excellent.
income. That was good
A
income.
police officer made $30 a week in those years.
So as a young man, you were kind of raking it in there for a time.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to those days.
In proportion, of course. The General Motors exhibit of the future, and I'm not saying it correctly, but that impressed everyone. At
Yeah.
least it seemed. Did that impress you?
Very much so. I said that, by God, I'd like to get one of the first cars that I could, with the fins and everything else.
What was your first car?
In 1939, I bought a 1931 Model A Ford for $15.
Were you mechanically
Yeah.
inclined? I assumed you were.
I went to, the high school that I went to was the Brooklyn High School of Automotive Trades.
Oh, all right.
So
So you kept it running.
I kept it running. I ran for 4 years until I loaned it to my cousin to go on his prom, and the car never ran after that.
You think you got your $15 worth out of it?
I junked it when I brought it back home, and I got $12 for it in junk. So
So you did quite
it wasn't a
well.
loss. You didn't have insurance in those days.
But the Model T has such a good reputation, and I guess would you say that this
Oh yeah,
that this proves? I mean,
Yeah.
for you personally.
you bought all the parts you needed in Woolworths. It didn't have ignition wires. It had copper leads running from the spark plugs to the distributor. Didn't have a fuel pump because it was gravity flow from the front underneath the windshield. It was the gas tank. So it just flowed
Now,
right
the
into the
windshield
car.
wipers, were they mechanical or were they electric?
No, they were pneumatic. They worked off the manifold.
Off the press, right. But it sounds like you could have had, as a young man, had a lot of fun with that.
Oh yeah, it had a rumble seat.
Oh, it did?
Oh, yeah.
All the young men loved rumble seats.
That's right.
All right. Now, during the time that you were at the World's Fair, besides Billy Rose, what kind of a person was Billy Rose anyway? I mean, here you
You
are.
never saw him.
Oh,
Very seldom that you saw him. The general manager of the show, I'm just trying to remember his name. It's so many years
yeah,
now.
oh, yeah.
But he ran the whole operation there, and of course, being a candy butcher, that's what they called us. I worked for Handsome and, God, I can't think of the second name.
Well,
But I have a cousin, well, my father's cousin, who's still alive, who was the foreman of all the candy butchers, who's done that all his life.
at fairs or things
At
like
fairs,
this.
Madison Square Garden,
Yeah, things
Yankee
like
Stadium, all of that.
What other famous people did you see or, just catch out of the corner of your eye as, were there anybody who came through that you happened to,
Well, you saw a lot of military officers came through. The president came, the vice president
Oh,
came on
you
different
did see
occasions. Yeah.
Franklin D. Roosevelt?
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm sorry.
The governor,
The government. Well,
Lehman.
let's spend a moment on the president.
Okay.
Did you happen to, you're busy selling, and so on and so forth, of course. Did you get reasonably close to see him?
No, you couldn't get that close.
Okay.
Secret Service had it all zeroed out, where I guess they kept 10 rows behind them, 10 rows on the side.
So you had to.
That was it.
Did you ever see LaGuardia?
Oh, yeah. Fiorello, the little flower.
Well, of course, he's one of my favorite, and you can get into a discussion whether he was good or bad. I know there's very controversial.
I remember as a kid, the newspapers were on strike, and he read the comics to us on Sunday for a couple of weeks on the radio.
Right. The man who was kind of conducting this for the city, I'm trying to think of what
Grover Whalen.
Thank you. Did you see him, or did?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
He was an ex-police commissioner of New York.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
And he seemed very energetic.
He was a dapper Dan.
He was a dapper Dan?
Yeah, he wore spats and striped trousers. It was amazing. And a Hamburg hat.
All right. Now, you may have been too young for this, but I'm thinking of the predecessor of LaGuardia, Walker. What was his name? I can't.
Jimmy Walker.
Jimmy, did you ever get a chance to see him, or a little bit earlier?
He's
A little bit
a
earlier.
little bit too early.
All right. Now, did you work at the fair till it finally closed down?
Yeah.
Was that, I get kind of the impression, or maybe, I really need your thoughts on this, but the 1940 World's Fair was quite different from the 39 in the thing of atmosphere because of the war. It already breaking out in Europe in 39.
Well, it wasn't that it was so much different than atmosphere. They put more rides in to make more money. That's what they did do.
Right. Now, you're a young man, and politics is perhaps not the thing of great importance to a young man. But the Polish pavilion closed, and did that mean anything to you at the time as a young person, which is,
No. Didn't even faze me.
The war clouds were, but again,
Yeah.
most Americans just, I guess Bob, can I say, wasn't quite that close to people yet.
It wasn't that. It was just the idea that we weren't ready at that point, because the draft, when they instituted it in 1940, they didn't even have, they gave them broomsticks for guns.
Down in Fort Dix, I believe.
That's right, and they had plywood panels for tanks and trucks.
And they were drafted for a year in peacetime.
Yeah, that's what they were supposed to be for
And
a year.
those poor fellows stayed in for the full,
The full length.
full length. Now, 1939, how old were you in 39?
16.
16. Did you ever for a moment think, as the war clouds got more and more and Europe really went through it, that someday you'd be in the service?
No.
No, I mean, you just went on your...
That's right, I went on my happy way.
With most
That's
Americans did.
All we thought about was girls.
Well,
That
for a
was it.
16-year-old boy,
Yeah.
I guess that's a very healthy thing. Now, we're going to go into that, but let's go into your marriage for a moment, then when did you get married?
Well, I'm in my second marriage
Oh,
now.
okay.
My first marriage was September 1948,
So this is after World War II.
after World War II.
And your second marriage was?
I married 10 years.
Right, okay. And you have a family?
Yes, I have 2 sons with my first marriage, and a stepson and a stepdaughter, and 3 grandchildren with my second marriage.
So you've got a large family then.
Yeah.
It really is. Now, finally the day is coming, and Pearl Harbor, do you remember anything about Pearl Harbor?
Oh, yeah.
If you would. Where were you on,
Well, we were in a car. We'd been coming home from my grandfather, where I kiddingly said we were at war with the Japanese, never realizing at the time that I said it that something like this could happen. I just said it to shake him up more or less,
Right.
because he was a peace activist in those days.
And there really was a great movement in this country to remain neutral.
That's
on
right.
this. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
and by very honest, sincere people. And some were not, I know, on the extremes,
Well,
but some, go
you
ahead.
had communists, you
Yeah.
had neo-Nazis in New York.
And of course, they had their own axe to grind.
That's right. And everybody was like going in a different direction. It was like a cat with 20 tails.
Before we get into that, because you're from New York, you get a kind of an opportunity to sometimes see. Did you ever see any famous sports people, like Joe Louis or any of those folks?
Oh yeah, Babe Ruth.
Did you get a
Lou
chance to
Gehrig.
see? Well, let's spend a moment on it. Where did you happen to see Babe Ruth?
Saw him at Yankee Stadium.
Playing, or was he
Playing.
He was. Oh, all right.
He was
So,
playing.
so tell us your impressions. Now he's getting on by this time, or isn't he yet?
Oh yeah, he played his last game in 1934, and he went to another team. I'm just trying to think which team he went to.
I can't remember.
And then he came back to the Brooklyn Dodgers.
He did.
He came back to the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1938 or 39.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He played for a year and then became a coach for a year or so
he
with
did.
them. And then he was gone.
Of course, you're seeing him at the kind
At
of
the tail end.
tail end.
Yeah.
How did people treat? I mean, everybody knew that his day had passed. Did people boo him or anything? I hope not.
Never.
I mean, you know.
Never booed him.
Yeah.
But I think the saddest episode in sports was Lou Gehrig. At that last game,
All right. Did you happen to be at that
I was at the
stadium?
Yankee Stadium that
If
day.
you would tell us about that.
And it was unreal because here he had played all those 2,000 games consecutively, sometimes hurting and everything else, that he got into the lineup on the road a couple of times and batted first, and then came out of the game just so long as he kept that streak going.
Sure.
And then you could see the deterioration in the last few months. As a matter of fact, I think the deterioration started the season before.
Because he had what we call Lou Gehrig's disease,
Yeah.
I mean, now named after him. And so you were there for that dramatic and very sad moment
Right.
when he bid farewell to his fans.
He was an unreal athlete. He wasn't as flamboyant as Ruth, but I think he was great. Well, he was a New York boy. That was the
Not that
whole
you're
thing.
prejudiced.
That's right.
Now, I'm a little bit younger than you, but one of my great heroes listening to the radio was Joe Louis. Did you ever get a chance to see Joe Louis box?
I
Go ahead.
saw him fight.
Do you remember
times.
do you remember who he boxed at?
I saw him when he beat Schmeling
You did?
Yeah.
The second time?
the second time.
Well, that must have been. I'd love to have been with that crowd.
Well, that was the fastest knockout that they had on record. That was
Was
gone.
it at that?
Yeah. He was gone in the first round. He hit him like 5 times and Schmeling was down, and that was it.
And I'm trying to think of who was that announcer that got. He always carried all those games. I can't think of his name, but he got so excited.
Dumphy?
Yes, that was it.
Dumphy,
And
yeah.
didn't he? I'm trying to think of the word. Smedling's down, and he got.
Yeah, unreal.
That was. Oh, that'd been an exciting moment to see. Do you remember who the other fight was that you saw? Because for a time, Louis had what he called the bum of the month type of thing. I mean, there in his prime, he was just taking these fellas on.
He almost lost the fight to Billy Conn.
Did you happen to see that fight?
No,
I
just
listened
saw
to
it
it
in
on
the
the.
newsreels and
I listened
listened to it on the radio.
What an
Yeah.
exciting fight that was.
Billy Conn was the champ if he would have stayed away from him that round.
Is that right? That was.
He had beat him by points.
Was one of the
He really
moments
did.
of sports history.
That's right.
What do you think of Joe Louis? I mean, he seemed like a very nice person.
Yeah, well, I met him in the Army.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I met him in Africa. And he was a plain, down-to-earth boy who really rose to greatness just on sheer integrity and his own guts. And these guys today couldn't get away with anything if he was still in the ring the way they get away with.
I know they have these computer things today, you know, these matching of
Yeah.
fights, but I don't want to go into that, but I'm going to be a big Joe Louis fan. Well, now, finally, it's December 7th, 1941, and you are how old?
Oh,
Let's see.
I was 18.
18, so the draft didn't come immediately. But tell us, now what happened?
Well, some of my friends enlisted, and my mother raised the roof because I tried to enlist. And at that point, if you were under 21, you needed a parent's signature. I went down to join the Marines, and I don't know why, I just couldn't pass the eye test. So they rejected me. Then I went down to join the Navy, and I memorized the eye chart. And they switched eye charts on me.
Oh, they did?
They
I've never
switched
known
eye
that anybody ever
charts.
did that. I thought those charts were standard.
No, they switched eye charts just as I got up to the line.
You know who else cheated was Harry Truman in World War I on the
Yeah.
eye charts, but they didn't switch the chart on him. So
And
anyway, of course you couldn't.
I couldn't pass it.
Now, did you go to Whitehall Street?
No,
No, because that
I was inducted at Grand Central Palace.
Oh, okay. Now, Grand Central Palace, is
It
that?
was 45th Street and Lexington Avenue.
And tell us a little bit about that building. I'm not familiar with that.
Big, massive, that was a showcase building where they had expositions at the time and shows and all different things. And this was the end of 1942
So,
when I was examined.
Mr. Miller, they were obviously still rejecting people in 42 because later on, I think the,
Well, I would have passed the eye test for the Marines 3 months later if I would have gone back.
because they had lowered the.
They had lowered the
Yeah,
standards.
This was,
Yeah.
the need for people, of
Right.
course. So there you are. What were you, I was thinking about employment. If I have a young man at 18, I'm not too happy because he's going to disappear on me.
Well, I had a friend, my father's friend, who had a couple of laundry routes up in Harlem. Well, we won't go into that. We delivered towels, sheets, and pillowcases to all the bordellos.
Did you? Well, besides that, did you go to the Apollo by any chance? The famous.
Oh, well,
theater
we
up
used to
there.
go dancing in the Savoy Ballroom on 7th Avenue.
Oh wow!
But you were safe on the streets in Harlem at that time.
Absolutely. I mean, Harlem was really had a renaissance in the
That's right.
20s and into
It was
the,
unreal.
It was very
Nobody
nice,
bothered
I
you.
understand. Yeah, I understand.
And when I used to make my deliveries, as soon as I pulled on the street in East Harlem, I didn't even have to worry about taking the keys out of the ignition of the truck. The kids knew that I was delivering into the area, in the buildings that some of them might have lived in. Never bothered the truck or anything.
That's a whole story in
That's
itself.
a story in itself today.
So anyway, so you're delivering, of course,
Yeah.
and the war is going on, and
Right. And then, of course, all my friends were gone, and because I was already registered for the draft, I couldn't enlist. They wouldn't let me go and enlist.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I volunteered
Well,
through the draft board
what was the reason for that, Mr. Miller?
because they were working strictly through the draft then. They had already taken all the National Guard units, and whatever enlistees they took right up until a certain cutoff date in the middle of 1942.
I see.
And I went to the draft board and told them, well, let me go. I don't have anybody home. And that was the situation. And
Well, the call finally came when?
at the latter part of 1942, I went to Grand Central Palace. From there, they took us to Fort Dix.
All right, if we'll stay just a moment, because for a time, and correct me on this, Mr. Miller, but they might take, you're standing in line and so on going, the first 50 fellows might go in the Marines, more or less, and the next 50 went in the Navy and so forth.
That's how they worked.
Is that they were
That's
working?
exactly how they worked.
At this time?
At that time.
At the end of 42?
Right.
All right, and so there you go. The physical wasn't that rough, I assume.
Physical was nothing. If you coughed and breathed, they took you.
Right. All right, so off you go to Fort Dix. And you're what, 20 now, or 21?
19.
You're 19 at
Yeah.
this time. And of course, what happened at Fort Dix? Did you have basic there or not?
No. They gave you your uniforms.
Of course, that's New Jersey.
Yeah, they gave you your uniforms, your shots, and your AGCT,
Now, what's that?
the Army General Classification Test. That's to see what you were fitted for. Of course, it was like a farce.
Yeah. They just
They
needed,
took a look at you and they figured, well, we need 10,000 riflemen.
you're right.
If you had a college education or not, you were a rifleman. And that's how they took you.
All right,
4 or 5 days later, they shipped me down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training.
oh, you went, And this was for basic training,
Right.
was just for everyone at the moment. It wasn't infantry or anything at the moment, just basic
No,
training.
it was infantry.
It was infantry.
Right.
All right. Now it's interesting, when you went south, and of course, many people were black, you know, from the north, did they immediately segregate? How did they do that?
Yeah, the military was segregated. We went into town after 21 days.
Well, let's see, when you went south, I'm a black soldier, we'll say, from New York. I mean, I've just been, yeah, I've been at Fort Dix.
You went into a black unit.
Did you go down separately on trains already?
No,
You
we
went
were in
down
different
mixed.
cars.
Oh, different cars.
Different cars. In other words, whites in one car, blacks in another.
I just want to spend a little time on it because it's an era that's passed, and maybe we should, in a way, remember this. Again, I'm a black New Yorker, and I've really never been south. You know, doesn't mean too much to me. Did the trains leave New York already segregated, or leave Fort Dix already segregated?
Oh yeah, there was segregation in the military at that.
Oh no, I see. Even that's right. Even at Fort Dix.
Segregation in the military.
In other words, I'm a black fellow, and you go to Company C or whatever, and it's
That's right.
already segregated.
You were already.
Already separated.
Very few blacks went into fighting units
Yes.
at that time. They were strictly quartermaster,
Transportation.
MPs, none in chemical warfare that I could remember.
But I'm just wondering, it must have been a little, you know, young people are a little naive and so on. It must have been a little bit of a
Sure.
shock for some of these people that.
Well, we went into Columbia, South Carolina, which was a segregated city, and when we got to the center of town, and there was a big statue in the center of town, that was the borderline. We couldn't cross into the black neighborhood. It was off limits.
And vice versa,
And
of course.
vice versa.
All right, now there you are at, for basic training. How long was the training?
13 weeks.
13 weeks. This is just about standard for the military, until they get desperate, and I guess they cut it down. Did they cut it down later?
During the bulge.
And they cut it to what? If you
6 weeks.
6 weeks for these fellows going in at this time, which is, all right, so there you are, 13 weeks. Well, tell us a little bit about it. I mean, basic is something I think you have to go through as an experience. Some are humorous incidents and some are not.
You can't describe it.
Yeah, no, so-
You can't. I mean, being a city person, the first night in the woods, I caught poison ivy. And I caught poison ivy in the most awful spot you can imagine.
Oh, no. Oh.
And, well, they took me on sick call. They gave me Shuttle's mixture for the poison ivy, gave me 6 aspirins, 2 for the morning, 2 for the night, and 2 for the next morning, and come back tomorrow morning, and that was it.
You trained with what type of rifle?
We had the M1, the Garand.
Oh, you did have the M1?
Yeah.
Not the old Springfield?
I got it at Springfield because I fired expert on the range, and they gave me a sharpshooter's rifle with a scope.
Unfair question, Mr. Miller. It really is unfair, but I have to ask. How good was the training? And now we're looking back many years. How good was the training? All terrible, medium, or good? Or whatever you want to comment. I mean, you're going to risk your life. You know.
I think it was good in proportion to what they had to work with. They were taking everybody. Youngsters, old men. We had guys in our training company that were 38 years old, 39 years old, fathers with a couple of children. And it was a haphazard thing. And here we 18s, 19s, and they were getting the same physical training that they were. They couldn't keep up. They would fall by the wayside. They would get transferred out into another unit until after a while they just started to cut back. They started to discharge all those people above 35.
They did.
Yeah.
I see. Well, of course, you're a young fellow. Now, I assume you gung-ho,
Well,
or am I wrong?
it wasn't that I was gung-ho. I was a flip New York kid down south dealing with Southerners who, in my estimation, weren't as smart as me. Meanwhile, they outsmarted me every time around the block.
So you became, during basic, a rifleman then?
Well, I had 3 MOSs,
Now, what's
3
an
military occupation specialty.
All right.
While I was there, I drove for a 1-star general whose name was Leslie Perrin.
Now, how did you get that job?
I don't know, I just flopped into it.
Oh,
They
okay.
came one day and they took 6 guys out of the platoon that were going through driver's course, and that was it, because I could drive a car.
Well, I know the military is strange.
Yeah.
I mean, almost anything can happen.
You know, but they taught you how to drive a truck their way.
The Army.
The truck was the Army way. A car, as long as I could drive a car, and it was a stick shift because you didn't have automatic transmissions then.
So you drove the
I
General.
drove the General for about 4 weeks, and I didn't show up on time one day to pick him up, so the next day I was on KP peeling potatoes, which wasn't supposed to be punishment, but evidently it was. And that day, they came around from the Airborn looking for volunteers. And everybody said, you don't volunteer for anything in service. Because when they ask for a volunteer, you're either going to dig a ditch, or you're going to police the grounds, or something else.
I ended up on a laundry pile a mile high.
I can understand. Well, we stood there in line, and of course, you had your anti-Semitism in the military, just like you had any place else.
Let's spend a moment on that, because that's a very, let's go back to your childhood, because I'd like to go into that. New York has a large Jewish population.
I grew up in a strictly Jewish neighborhood.
So when did you kind of contact us?
In school, in junior high school, and in a boys' school.
Name calling, or was it on a
Well,
more difficult
you had a
level?
borderline. I lived on 9th Street. The borderline was 12th Street for the Italians. On 1st Avenue was the Polacks. Below Houston Street, you had Little Italy, so we were in the middle of all the Italians. So, you know, it was flagrant. It was flagrant
So
anti-Semitism.
you really couldn't cross over into there?
No, you had to be 3
up.
or 4 guys, otherwise you were going to get beat up.
Right.
Many a weekend I had a black eye or a broken nose.
So now you're in the Army, and I just didn't even, you know, we're in a different time. I hope we're in a different time on problems like this, hopefully. Was there this type of thing? I mean, if your name was in the South there, and your name was Ginsburg, I mean, obviously.
You were in trouble.
Were you? They
You were
really
in
gave it
trouble.
to you?
I was lucky, my name was Miller. They really didn't know what my religion was,
Right.
and I got away with a lot. Of course, I had a couple of guys in my outfit that we called crackers. They were from Kentucky and Tennessee and stuff like that. And one of them had been a washout. He had broken a leg going through jump school, so they washed him out and sent him back to infantry school. Anyway, he said to me, you don't have the nerve to join. No Jew is going to join the paratroopers, and I'll bet you that you can't do it. I said, well, what's the bet? And he said $500, and I bet him, and I won $500
You collect?
because I collected it, because I made it, and he broke his leg again, and he washed out again.
But it would be interesting because your name is not immediately recognized.
That's right.
So that, yeah, it must have been hurting at times when you hear these. I mean, you can't fight everybody.
No, but you have a lot of fights
Yeah, I mean,
until you learn that you have to start to take it with a grain of salt. Otherwise, you'll be fighting every day in a week.
was there? You know, sometimes these things are a little bit more subtle. I mean, sometimes it's just, you know, outright. But with the officers, was there any anti-Semitism?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was there.
Oh, yeah.
It was there.
there.
You know.
I think I was fortunate. I had when I went to parachute school, of course, I was in jump class 48, which is the 48th class going through parachute school. And every week was a number higher. Of course, when the war ended, I guess they were up in the 150s or the 160s. But every class had approximately 1,000 people, 1,200 people to start through jump school, of which they qualified at the end of 4 weeks, 200, the rest washed out.
Really tough then.
Yeah.
Really tough. Again, how long was the training for
Well,
the
it was
Airborn?
4 weeks of jump school, and you had something going for you because when you finished your 5th jump, the next day you got your wings and a 10-day furlough. That was it.
All right. Of course, I'm going to ask you about your first jump.
I don't think you realize what it's all about for the first jump. Well, let's look at it this way. You go through the first week of physical training, all PT, 8 hours a day.
Physical training.
Physical training. And then they start to get you into complete reflex condition.
A little bit more on that. What does that mean?
Well, reflexes, somebody would be walking by, a non-com or a drill instructor, and he'd walk by and all of a sudden you'd hear jab, 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 jab. Meant that.
Grabbing your...
No, jab is this, and if you said jab, jab, it was 2 times.
Oh, I see.
And if you didn't do it fast enough for him, you did 50 push-ups. That was a good reflex because it gave you a quick reflex to be able to think quickly on what you had to do. The second week was in a 34-foot high mock tower where they get you acclimated to the parachute harness. And
let me ask you, did anyone...
they quit.
Right then and there?
Right then and there at the 34-foot tower. And it's nothing, because you go out the tower, you're on a trolley wire in the harness, and you wind up in a sawdust bank.
But some people just weren't...
They couldn't get out the door.
So
They just froze right then and there, and that was it. It was the idea, look down 34 feet and see 34 feet of space and say, I'll break my legs, and walk away. And
so of course you got past that thing.
Yeah,
How many times did you kind of do, or was it almost endless number of times doing that?
oh, I guess
I mean, to
you
really
did it 7, 8 times a day for 5 days.
So you really...
Well, it really was to get you used to the opening shock of the parachute. That's what it's all about. And then, of course, they start to instruct you to pack your parachutes, which in combat you don't do, but for practice they teach you to pack your shoes.
You don't pack in combat?
No.
Someone else does this?
Riggers.
I'm not sure I like that idea.
That's right. I didn't. I did my own.
Why did they do that?
Well, they figure your training and everything else, but you learn very, very quickly. There's very little that can go wrong with a parachute and packing if it's stowed right. By stowing, it means folding the silk in a piano-type fold and stowing the lines back and forth, held in the pack by retaining bands, which are rubber bands, because they just pop right out from the flow.
I would think I would want to do my own parachute. Did most fellows trust other people to do them? I mean, in the real world out there? Or
in the real world out there, you took a rigger's chute.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, anyway.
Oh, so I'm sorry, we're back to
getting ready
for the first jump and all.
For the first jump. And the next week, they take us to the 250-foot tower to get you used to height. Like the parachute jump at Coney Island.
Is that about 250?
That's 250
so we
foot
can
high.
Imagine.
Yeah.
Some people wash out at that stage. Or
Well,
not too
that's
many,
where
I
you
think.
start to get injuries.
Oh.
Because the first time you go up is on the cable seat, but it's a harness where the chute comes down in a cable, and all you do is feel the bouncing when you get down to the bottom. You don't even touch the ground. Then they send you up in the towers. They send the chute up 6 foot or 10 foot below the rung where it releases you, and you're holding a piece of paper, and they'll say, number 1, drop your slip of paper, and they tell you, well, slip to the left or slip to the right or slip to the front. By slipping, it means pulling the risers in the front or pulling the risers on each side, so that when the chute billows out full of air, you start to slip to the area where you want to go.
And they can do that with that
Yeah.
cycle. They can do that.
And this, of course, was the old parachute, not like they jump now with the
And they were
square.
made of real silk.
Silk or nylon.
A nylon was coming in, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
The lines were nylon already.
They were
All
already.
the shroud lines were nylon. And then in the afternoon or morning, whichever group you were in, you started to pack your chute for the first jump. I think for my first jump, it took me...
No, we're talking off the tower, or
No, the
now
tower is no packing at all. It's a big billowy harness that gets hooked up to cables.
And you're learning to go left, right, forward,
yeah.
backwards. All right.
All right, now, either the afternoon or the morning, depending on when you were off the towers, they're teaching you to pack your chute, and you start to pack it for your first jump. Took me like 3.5 or 4 hours to pack my main chute for the first jump, and took me about 1.5 hours or so to pack my reserve.
Now, why so long?
Everything had to be right.
Okay.
Everything had to be right.
And somebody obviously is watching, I
Yeah.
assume. They're really being careful with
They're
this.
showing you how to fold the panels, how to flip them, how to dust them, and
Now,
everything
what do you mean
else.
by dust?
Well, when a chute is used, there's a certain amount of dirt in the air, and it gets into them. So when you're billowing the silk, packing it for the jump, you're flipping the panels to get any kind of excess dust or leaves or anything out of the chute. Because when you do land on the ground, they don't give every man a brand new chute. You're using used parachutes.
How many times would a parachute kind of last? Is it just...
Indefinitely.
Oh, really?
Indefinitely.
Yeah, as long as they're, yeah, indefinitely. Could they, now, I'm not being facetious at all, Mr. Miller, but could they be patched? In other words, refixed?
They were. Each panel, a 28-foot parachute, which is a jumping chute at that time, has quarter section panels where you could see the stitching. They could be repaired.
They could be repaired,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't know what...
They could
just
be
how
repaired.
All right, so now, how did you sleep that night?
Well, the night for the first jump, you really didn't know what it was all about. I mean, you know, you get into the plane and it's a tap jump.
All right, what's that mean?
The tap jump is that when you're in the plane and it's flying over the drop zone, they tell you, stick get ready, stick stand up, stick hook up, and you hook the static line to the cable in the plane. And there were two types of planes that we used, the C-47, which is a DC-3 Goonie bird, and the C-46. And the C-46 is a reverse door plane. We went out
Now,
the
what do you mean
plane,
by reverse door plane?
the door was on the other side.
All right.
And everything was practiced with this DC-3, the C-47, because that's a right-hand door going out the plane. So because you're holding the line this way. If you're going out the other plane, you're automatically switching to the other
Why did they
side.
have the difference of the, you know...
They
just-
weren't making the planes fast enough because even though they were used for troop carrier, they were still used for transportation and aerial supply.
Oh, I see.
And don't forget, a plane had to tow a glider. They really weren't coming through as fast as
Yeah,
they
because
could.
of the, obviously, the wartime
Yeah.
conditions. So there you are in line.
Here we are in line, and
Anybody refuse?
not
at
the
that point?
first jump,
Not the first jump.
not the first jump. And they tell you to stand in the door, and you shuffle down, and you turn, and you stand in the door, and you have a position that you're taught to stand in the door, and they tell you, don't look down, look straight out. And of course, they've taught you that when you jump out the door, you're going straight out sideways, and the wind will turn your body so that your back is towards the front of the plane, and you're falling down. Now, you're going to fall 105 feet from the time you leave the plane until the chute snaps open. That's the length of the static line, the canopy, and the shroud lines to the backpack. Takes between 2.5 and 3 seconds for the parachute to open from the time you leave the plane. So you say 1,000, 2,000, between 2 and 3, the chute should open. If it doesn't open, you're supposed to pull your reserve. Anyway, before that,
Well, how many people were on the plane to
16.
jump? 16 to jump.
16 to jump.
Okay.
And the 8 on one side and 8 on the other side. So that by the time, if it was an actual combat jump, by the time 16 goes out the plane door, he's on a dead run. He's running so fast to keep up, he can't move fast enough.
No, the 16th fellow there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. But like I say, this was a tap jump. And you stood in the door, and as soon as they say don't look down, you automatically look down.
Human nature being what
That's
it is.
right. And there you see at the corner of the field, half a dozen ambulances,
How high up? How high up are you?
1,200 feet.
That's pretty low, isn't it? Or am I wrong?
Well, it's taller than the Empire State Building.
That's low. I want a lot more space.
If the chute's going to open, it's going to open. If it's not going to open, it's not going to open.
So there you are, ready to go.
And
Out
he
you go.
taps me, and I go out, and the chute opened between
Now.
2 and 3,000.
Was that the longest 2 seconds of your life or not really? Just
It went so fast,
It-
it just seemed like all of a sudden, your head is tucked down, and you just hear the whish of the air as the risers pass, you're going up. and then all of a sudden you're just swaying and gently in a breeze.
So it's that fast.
It was that fast. Of course, you're falling to the ground, I guess, 68 foot a second or something like that. You're down on the ground and nothing.
Of course, now that the chute is open, your next thing is about the landing.
Worrying about landing. And of course, they've already
So tell us about, of course,
they've taught you to tumble and fall, keep your knees flexed and your toes down so that there's no injury to your ankles or your knees when you do fall. And you're supposed to tumble.
At this time, parachuters' boots, were they pretty decent? In other words, the best?
They were excellent.
They were excellent. I mean,
They had a steel plate running from here to almost the heel inside the boot, made into the boot, and of course the front end of the boot had steel on it.
So now you're going down, and well, how far did you get near the target area yourself?
Well, I was right on the target area. I was right on the drop zone. I mean, the jump master controls the jump. I mean, as he taps you, he only let 3 or 4 men out the plane over the field, and then the plane goes around again.
So they're very careful.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're very careful.
On the second jump, it's not a tap jump. You're starting to move fast. Well, like I say, for the first jump, it took me 3.5 hours to pack the chute. For the second jump, it took me about 45 minutes, because then I knew the chute was going to open, nothing was going to happen.
All right. Some of the fellas decide, one jump's enough.
Some of them quit after they got down on the ground.
Yeah.
That was it.
I would think that, and correct me, Mr. Miller, but there probably wasn't much pressure to keep them in there. If you didn't want to, I would assume it was. Or was there pressure by that time because the amount of times you know,
they were building. They were making divisions. Don't forget, we had 2 airborne divisions at the time, and they needed 3 more.
And so there was a pressure to stay in.
There was a pressure to stay in.
By this time, because they've
That's
gone
right.
so far with you with training and all.
You had to be a volunteer to be in the
Right.
paratroops. If you washed out, they put you into the gliders. You had no chance, no refusal. That was where they put you in.
I'm looking at myself here. I'm not sure I want to be in the gliders.
I went for a couple of glider rides. I wouldn't want any part of it. It's the eeriest feeling at the bottom part of your stomach you could ever have.
It's just so helpless.
They're flimsy.
And but you're
They're
helpless
flimsy.
too. I mean, you're depending on.
Here the plane is towing you along, and all of a sudden the pilot is sitting there and he releases the cable. And all of a sudden you hear eerie noises as the wings flap. Because it's cloth covered. The whole outside of the aircraft is cloth.
Let's spend a moment on that. The pilots for those, were they Air Force pilots, or did they have some
They were
sergeant?
glider pilots. They were actually in the unit that they were in. They were trained by the Air Force. I think that they were...
The bars, yeah.
They were all warrant officers or second lieutenants.
I'm just wondering, they just didn't almost, flippantly, well,
No.
you go take this.
No,
They were trained.
They were trained for that.
So this was.
But my God, if you saw some of the fields and the condition of some of the gliders in combat.
Yeah, as we'll do. Oh. Well, anyway, so you stayed, of course, with the Airborne.
Yeah.
Now, how many jumps in this advanced training before they were ready to,
Well, you did your 5 qualifying jumps.
Now, what does that exactly mean?
Well, the first jump is from 1,000 foot, 1,200 foot at a tap jump. The second jump is 3 airplanes emptying their men all together simultaneously, so that you're 48 men in the air at one time.
But you're still on that lower air.
Well, you're up to around 1,500 feet.
A little bit higher.
Yeah, not much higher, but up to 1,500 feet. The third jump, you already got 9 aircraft in the air flying, which they're moving into a company type status. You've gotten out of the squad, the platoon, into the company type, which is 9 aircraft, which is a V of V's. It's 3, 3, and 3.
At this time of the war, were they getting into dropping light equipment?
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking like machine guns, or did they?
No, you carried that with you when you went down. Light machine guns, a 30 caliber light, you carried with you if you were a machine gunner. Mm-hmm. You carried all your weapons with you.
Going down.
Going down. The only thing you really didn't carry was your mortars, your base plates, And even some of those guys that had the little 60s carried them with it.
But they were beginning to drop the mortars along with you?
Oh,
There
yeah,
was-
and artillery.
They were beginning to, I mean, I didn't realize how
Yeah.
far, as the war progresses,
Yeah.
more and more of this.
That's
Now,
right.
let me go back to the parachute for a moment. It fascinates me. Fellas get careless, or didn't. I mean, it's your life, but, we all get a little careless.
Oh, yeah. I had a Mae West on one jump, but that
Now,
was...
Mae West was
one of the lines swinging up over the canopy, developing in where it looked like Mae West's bosom.
right, and that's bad.
That's bad because the air is spilling out of the parachute at twice the amount that you ordinarily want it to go, so you're dropping quicker. And
How does one get out of that predicament?
there's nothing you can do. You have to be ready for a hard knock on the
The
ground.
second shoot is not the answer.
Well, you can use the
necessarily.
reserve, but you're never going to get it open in time.
Oh, okay, yeah. People wouldn't know.
Yeah,
So that,
because when you pull your reserve, you have a little spring-fed top chute, the pilot chute, which is about 14 to 18 inches square, works on springs, pops out, and the silk will dump right out, but you have to get the lines out, and then you have to shake because there's not enough air to fill that chute while you have a chute above you. So it means that chute is going to be like this, and the reserve is going to be like that, and they're both at an angle spilling air out fast. So sometimes you're better off not using your reserve.
so most people did not use the second shoot unless it
No.
was really a moment where you had no choice.
In combat, you didn't have time for a reserve.
Now, the other thing I would be worried about going down, besides bumping into other people going down, which is not the fun.
How about landing on somebody's
Well, do
parachute?
you want to go over that? Or the equipment? I mean, I don't want to be hit by some kind of a...
You don't get
Sure.
hit by equipment
Oh,
because it's pretty tight. But land on somebody's parachute and watch the guy running across, try to keep his parachute from collapsing as he runs across the other guy's parachute. You just can't hop off on the near side. You got to run to the far side and keep moving the rises so that you keep enough air in your parachute it doesn't collapse.
Not very easy, really. And then, of course, when I even talk about wartime conditions, I mean into the
Well,
sense of the...
when you think of it, you start to laugh because it looks pretty funny.
All right. So you did the five
Did the five
required
jumps.
5 jumps.
And
Now where are you?
well, I was sent back. I took my training for Airborn school at Fort Benning. And from there I was sent to Fort Bragg to be assigned to a unit for my advanced training.
One of the things that's, I guess it's just part of human nature, is inter-rivalry among different groups. Now, you got your wings. Were they fighting wings if you went in and had a little slurp somewhere?
Yeah.
And, whoever would be...
They didn't start up with us because we were taught we were better than 10.
I don't want to get into all that, but there was this...
That's right. It was continuous.
It was continuous rivalry. All right. So please continue now.
Well,
You're ready to be assigned to...
yeah, I was sent to Fort Bragg, and every paratrooper must go to radio school and demolition school. That's a must. You have to be a radio operator in an emergency, and you have to know demolition. No matter what you are, whether you're a cook, a clerk, a mortarman, a machine gunner, you have to know those two things. And so they sent me to Camp McCall, which was about 25 miles away for my further unit, and I was assigned to my 1st Parachute Regiment, which was the 541.
All right. The radio, of course, would be the old tubes, radio tubes. We
Yeah,
got to the
it was-
transistors by...
Well, you had the 536, which was the handset. You had the 300, which was the backpack set. And then they taught you a certain amount of Morse code just in case.
All right.
You had to be able to do 20 words a minute in Morse code. I couldn't do 2 now.
No, well, of course, the time is... Now, I'm interested, what was the other thing you had? You had to have the
Demolition.
radio. And demolition.
Demolition.
Good training.
Very good. Excellent. It just showed you that they were preparing you to be dropped behind enemy lines.
This really isn't esoteric, but there were laws, I'm thinking from the First World War on, or somewhere in there, all these laws of war, the procedure. And one of the things is you're not supposed to shoot at people coming down in parachutes Was that at all observed? I mean, you had said, forget that. I mean, would you want to comment on that?
I'll
Oh,
get
well,
to
we'll
that
get into
when
that
we come
later.
to
Okay.
D-Day.
Or when we get to D-Day. But that, wasn't there such an international? I thought
Yeah,
it was
but
at least,
it didn't mean a
it
thing. The
didn't.
Japanese were notorious for it. The Germans did it on and off.
Right.
I don't know if the Italians did
Yeah,
it.
but
But
that
this
was just
it. Yeah.
paper. That was a paper thing,
Right.
basically. I'm interested, what about the officers? Were they going with you through the line, or they had their own jumps? I mean, the officers.
Oh no, they were right with us. A parachute officer went through the same class you did.
Oh, he did?
He was in a platoon of officers instead of a platoon of enlisted men, and did exactly what you did. Didn't make any difference. You went to radio and demolition school. He went to radio and demolition school.
What's the highest officer you ever saw jump in combat?
My division commander,
And-
General Gavin.
General Gavin jumped?
Yeah.
He
He
was
was the
we
first-
always think of, you know.
He was the first man out of the plane in Normandy. He was the
Okay.
first man out of the plane in Holland.
I'm a little taken back. I mean, in
He
pleasantly.
carried
I'll
an
say this.
M1 rifle.
He did. Now, General Gavin, I mean, the younger people, is really a very respected general of the war. But I never knew that
He's buried at West Point.
that he did actual jumps, and he did.
They all did.
They did.
General Ridgway, who was the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne when we were overseas in Africa, he jumped. He didn't jump into Sicily because
No.
it was a combat team that went into Sicily.
But he wasn't 50,000 miles back,
No.
and you know, that's.
He was
I learned
he was in the lead plane that Gavin jumped out of.
So here you are, you had your training, and you're ready to go.
Yeah. And well, of course.
And you were assigned.
No assignment yet. You were going to be shipped to a replacement as a unit. The 82nd was already overseas in Africa.
Right, now we had two airborne divisions, the 82nd.
The 82nd and 101st.
What were the other three? Do you remember, Bob, that eventually?
You had the 13th, the 17th, and the rest were all individual regiments. But I'll get to that because I eventually was assigned to one of the individual regiments. I finished all my advanced training, and now I'm ready to be assigned to a permanent unit. Of course, I'm going to ship overseas immediately, but I get a 10 or a 15-day delay en route to Fort Meade, which is the POE that I'm going to be shipped
Now, what's
to.
POE?
Port of Embarkation. Fort Meade was in Maryland.
We're talking 1943 now.
Yeah.
What was, and this is another tough one, what was our military situation? Because the turning point comes kind of in 43. Were we, at that moment, did it seem like we were winning, or were we
Well,
holding our own, or losing?
They had beat the Africa Corps in Africa, and we
At
were
this time,
pretty
right?
well set in
In oth-
Africa.
In other words,
That's it.
Rommel had already left Africa.
Right. And the
They still-
Kasserine Pass had already been done.
Taken in Italy. And Sicily had been taken yet?
No, not
Sicily
yet.
had not yet
No.
been taken, and
No.
you're ready now
I'm ready
to
to
go overseas.
Right.
All right.
Well, I got my delay en route. I went home, of course, and then I reported back to Fort Meade, which didn't make sense, but that's the way the Army operates. Because from Fort Meade, they brought me back up to New York.
And did you get a chance to sneak home a little bit, or?
No,
No, it was
I
just-
got no chance at all.
No.
Because took us up to Camp Shanks, who's strange as it is, my father helped build. He was a general labor foreman on the job for Caldwell Wingate up there.
Oh, my.
Anyway, Camp Shanks, that second night that we were there, the first night, of course, you couldn't do anything. We got in too late. But the second night, they alerted us. They marched us down to the river and got on a ferry boat at the dock there and took us down the Hudson to the city.
Well, was any rank given yet? Were anybody make their PFC stripe, or wasn't, there was no rank yet, or were there?
Well,
I mean, of the fellows going to
you
sea.
had the rank that you had ordinarily when you joined. In other words, if you were a private or PFC or a corporal or a sergeant, you kept your rank. You didn't lose it when you
didn't lose
transferred in,
into the paratroopers.
into the paratroopers.
But no one was making rank at that
No,
point.
nobody
No.
was making rank.
Yeah, because you went through all the
Right.
training, but no one was making rank.
Yeah.
All right.
The table of organization called for a radio operator to be a corporal, if you were a radio operator. Demolition man had no rank at all, other than that he could blow his hands off or something like that. But
There was a hazardous pay or whatever it is.
that's your jump pay that you start to collect when you finish jump school.
In '43, the average salary of a private was
$50 a month
$50 a month,
plus jump pay.
and jump pay would be what?
$50 a month.
$50 a month. All right.
Officers got 100, which we yelped about.
Because you jumped the same as they, or they
That's
jumped
right.
the same
They
as
did
you.
the same thing we did, and they got double.
Well, we'll go on.
Okay.
So you got on the ferry boat and
Got on a ferry and got down and saw the skyline of New York. And, well, there were half a dozen of us from the city there, and they put us up on a big boat. It was the Ile de France. And we went over on the Ile de France.
Of course, that was all camouflaged by this time with gray
yeah.
paint or whatever.
Well, whatever it was.
Yeah, whatever.
You-
Were you escorted over, do you know?
No, we went alone.
I understand because of the speed of those
Yeah.
liners that
That's right.
That they could
She was
outrun
no
the subs.
convoy, because she was fast enough to outrace any submarine.
submarine. Did it have any, well, I know it's hard because
Well,
you're
it had naval guns on it, you know, but...
nothing that's, all right. So how, was it all paratroopers or everybody and his brother on there going over?
Oh, no, I think that there were 22,000 of us on the boat.
How many?
22,000. Well, they stacked us like cattle. I was on E deck, 5 high.
Now,
They had the berths 5 high.
I went on one of those general ships and I got so seasick. How did, I mean, it was a small, you know.
No, there was nothing.
There was no seasickness with that
Except,
thing.
like, on a day out, would stop at 2:30 in the morning, dead in the water. And when you're used to the screw turning continuously and hearing the throb, I jumped up.
Yeah.
I jumped up, grabbed my boots, put them around my neck, and ran up topside.
Do you know why they stopped to this day?
They said there might have been a submarine around. They weren't sure. They thought they picked something up on sonar. But just to make sure, that's what they did.
They wanted to
Yeah,
listen
but-
then, is that, yeah.
Right. About an hour and a half later, they started again, and that was it.
All right, so
Well, we landed in Africa.
where in Africa?
Casablanca.
Casablanca, right.
Yeah.
Was that I mean, you know, is that a large sea harbor? I mean, is it
Beautiful harbor,
beautiful
but there
harbor?
were a lot of sunken ships around.
Where there?
Yeah, a lot of sunken ships. But everywhere you looked, you saw naval ships and transports and everything else. They were starting because this was,
Oh, what's the date on it, Bob?
I think it's
Oh, again, roughly, it's 43.
beginning of June of 43.
43.
Yeah, they were starting to accumulate everything, and they were trying to throw off the Germans as to where the invasion was going to be.
The invasion of so-called Fortress Europe.
Right.
Right.
Sicily, Sardinia, Greece, Crete, whatever.
Women.
They didn't know, but of course they knew already. It had been picked. Well, we got there, and they assigned us to units. And of course, all right, they read your name off the sheet, and they already had our service records and everything else. And I was assigned to Company G, 505th Parachute Infantry. And I got up there the next morning.
Now, this is a base outside of Casablanca, or is it already
Well,
inland a ways?
No, it was inland about 200 miles, 250
Oh,
miles, maybe more.
Did you go by what?
By
Army
truck, yeah. Anyway, we got to the regiment, and of course, the regiment was out training already for the day, so they took us to our company areas and told us what to do, report to the supply sergeant, get equipment, etc. That night, when the guys came in, they said, "Hey, we're being picked, don't worry about it. You're here today, you're gone tomorrow, life is sweet and short, don't worry."
Giving you a hard time.
That's right, that was the greeting. Well, at that time, I was a PFC, and We bounced around. They gave us 2 days to get acclimated and everything else to the heat of the desert and the cold of the nights. And then we started training. I think we did 3 practice jumps in 2 weeks before it started. We had some casualties on the jump. A couple of the boys got killed. A couple of them landed on some of these cactus trees that they had there with long spear leaves that went right through their bodies, and there was nothing we could do about saving them. And that was the indoctrination to death, more or less.
And of course, you're young people, and that's...
Yeah, and of course, you looked at it and you shrugged and you said, well, there for the grace of God go I, and that was it. It made me think, though, and I really considered quitting at that point. But when they said I would be assigned to a glider regiment, and having ridden in a glider back in the States, that like veered me back to the main source again.
Lesser of two evils.
That's right. Well,
of course, rumors are all over.
Rumors.
I mean, that's typical in war and
that's
any
right.
armed
The
force.
rumors were unreal. Well, the truth is we got down to 3 days before the invasion, or 4 days. The invasion force of Montgomery's army and Patton's army were already at sea. We were still in Africa. But we were going to spearhead the invasion. We were going to be a reinforced regimental combat team led by Colonel Gavin, who was my regimental commander. At that time, he was still a colonel. Of course, they fit us into different squads and platoons. We were replacements for guys that got sick or whatever, and they built up the regiment, whereas a normal complement of a regiment would be 3,000 men. They built it up to over 4,000 men, because they allowed for 35% casualties on the jump. 3 days before we were told we were gone. That was more food for thought. I think that's really the first time in my life that I looked for solace with God. I get melancholy when I think about it.
Well, it's a young person, and it's, well, anyone, of course, when you realize that that's...
It was really, I don't know, a soul-searching thought as to what I had done right in my life up to that point and what I had done wrong. And of course, you went to see the chaplain the next day to...
And everyone, would you say that, Bob, that everyone is going through some type of...
Some type.
Some type of...
And on the night of the invasion, it was pitch dark out. We were already at the airfield, and we loaded on the planes. And Gavin was in the lead plane. We had our whole regiment, a battalion of artillery, engineers, all the supporting troops that would have to go with a regimental combat team. And they gave us a battalion from the 504th Parachute Infantry to reinforce us above, just in case. And we set out.
And you set out from where?
From Africa to Sicily.
Okay. And where were you kind of in Africa? Were you in Tunisia at the time?
Yeah,
we
were in Tunisia. Yeah.
Okay. Well, probably, was it old German or French air base, do you know, or did you have your own?
It was controlled by us already.
Yeah, but I mean, was it an old base or was it kind of a brand new thing?
Oh no, everything was Quonset huts, steel matting on the runways.
I mean the field itself.
I don't know.
Oh, I just wanted.
I don't know.
I just wanted if it was.
It was the first time that I was at that field, so
Right.
I couldn't tell you. It was nighttime.
Oh, it was nighttime.
Yeah,
of
I
course.
couldn't tell you anything.
What it was. So
They brought us there. We got there late evening by truck.
And everything was hustle.
Everything. They had us out by the plane 6 hours before we had to board the plane.
Yeah, well,
Well, it was hurry up and wait again.
in this case, I can understand that things had to go right.
Well, of course, I broke my rifle down maybe 20 times, cleaned it, field stripped it, put it back together again, broke it down again, made sure the trigger mechanism
Right.
was working right, the bolt was in straight,
Oh,
you know, it was everything. Then all of a sudden, the company commander came up to me and he said, Miller, I understand that you're a qualified expert with the BAR,
now what's a BAR?
Browning Automatic Rifle. It was a weapon that was used in World War I. It fired, if you could feed it fast enough, fired faster than a machine gun. Because on automatic, it would tend to fire up, so you had to keep your hand down on the top of the barrel to hold it down. Anyway, I wound up not with the M1, but with a BAR for that. And of course, I had a gun bearer with me who carried enough ammunition magazines beside his own load, plus my load of ammunition to use.
How long a flight from the air base to the drop over Sicily?
I would imagine, well, we flew a dog leg.
What? Go ahead.
All right, we flew up north straight, and then we made a right-hand turn to surprise them. But they knew we were coming anyway. Anyway, our intelligence was bad again for a change, and they had one of the best German Panzer divisions in the German army there.
And they
But
were waiting.
we didn't, yeah, but we didn't suffer the casualties from the Germans.
So
We
where-
suffered it from our own Navy. They
Oh.
shot down about 25 of our planes.
Our Navy did?
Our Navy.
Just plain nervousness, do you think, Bob?
Yeah,
I'm just
trigger
nervous.
happy.
Trigger
Happy.
Where did you land in Sicily?
We landed about on the southwest shore, right outside of the town Bourges.
But far from Palermo? And,
Oh yeah, we were like,
You were across the whole Sicily.
whole-
there was
the
going to be
whole
fighting
Sicily.
across all Sicily.
yeah, we were going to fight our way across.
So you
But we
landed...
got there before Montgomery.
We won't go into that. So the casualty, I mean, any death, of course.
The casualties on the jump were as they anticipated, but it was stupidity. But after that, all our aircraft, instead of just having the blue star, the white star and a blue ball, had the bar across it,
Which meant?
which meant that it was American aircraft. It was recognition. And then we started to paint white stripes on the fuselage and white stripes on the wings, so that the Navy or anybody else shooting wouldn't get trigger happy again.
Right.
But that was a lesson.
Oh, a
But-
bitter one. But
A bitter one, but it did.
Now, you jumped, and let's take your own personal...
Well, my squad landed maybe 3 miles scattered all over the area.
and how would one get together? What was the
Well,
way one...
You had passwords, but everybody had a compass. And you have to learn to use the compass. If you can't use a compass, you're not going to make out as a paratrooper behind enemy lines. And everybody had a map. The map was to scale, and we had to get right outside to the northeast corner of the town, and every company had its own perimeter around the town, because now the ground forces were going to start to come in.
All right, and they were landing on the coast, was that...
They were landing on the coast.
Had they landed yet?
No,
They
we
hadn't
were
landed.
there about 3 hours before they started to
Let's
land.
take again with your own, there you've come down, was your landing decent?
Yeah.
Your own landing
The
was
landing
decent?
was decent. The field was rocky. There were rocks all over the
So
field.
what time did you land? Was it dawn yet? Or
No, it was about 5 o'clock in the morning.
So it was just,
It's just about starting to get gray.
and this is just what they would want. I mean,
That's
just so
right.
that you could see it a little bit.
Yeah.
Were you with other paratroopers, or were they some distance away, your people? In other words,
No,
it was-
our regiment wound up pretty decent.
so you could go as a
pretty
unit,
Yeah.
over towards...
Because you started to group up squads into platoons, and we eventually all hooked up. Our battalion was completely hooked up.
Your first contact with the enemy?
Was a small arms firefight, which we weren't involved in. There was another company that was involved in.
Upon landing?
After we started to
Yeah,
assemble to close on the town.
Oh,
Our job was to close the valve so they couldn't make their way north.
that was
They
the road
wanted
to
to break
block,
out.
to
That's
block the
right, to
road.
block the town.
Right.
It was easy. We took the town.
Well, German and Italian soldiers or just German?
both,
They were both?
both. There were fairly decent Italian soldiers there, fairly decent. They had a very good officer in command, a very good officer, and he knew his men would fight. Whether they wanted to fight or not, that's a
Well,
different story, yeah.
So
The
there
Germans were there to
there was
provide.
a difficult firefight then?
Yeah, it was a small arms firefight, which is a rarity. Because it's strictly artillery and mortars and stuff like that and aerial bombardment.
Then they were cut off, and
Yeah,
they did surrender then?
we cut off the road. Well, the Germans pushed towards shore and made a swinging motion to get behind us. At which time we got involved, but of course it was the afternoon already of that day. And you could see everything, and by then we had all our mortars set up, bazookas set up in a perimeter. We had a fire alley. Every gun was placed exactly the way it was written in a textbook. Exactly, it was unreal. Other than the screw up with the shooting us down, it was unreal. It was quick, it was efficient.
Air support?
Well, we had air support, but they were very, very careful because they didn't know what they were going to do.
Right.
They didn't know how far they were going to advance or anything like that.
They were at
We
least
had air support.
German planes, Italian planes?
No German, no
enemy,
Italian.
no. Oh. So anyway, the Germans are trying to make a run for it, or?
But they were trying to swing behind us to cut us off. But of course, there were very few casualties on our side. I would imagine that maybe we had in our regiment 75 to 100 wounded, maybe a couple killed.
And the regiment would be, how many at this time? I know.
Well, we were
it
cut
be
down. It was
5,000.
now down to the regular regiment, plus the
That
battalion.
would be what, how many?
4,000 men overall with the added battalion.
Now, in coming down, do they bring them medical teams and so on?
Oh yeah, we have our,
I would
have
assume
our
so.
doctors with us, our aid men, everything.
So
They jump with us.
okay.
And of course the gliders were starting to come in. They were cracking up, but we were getting equipment in. We were getting heavy artillery in. We got trucks in, we got jeeps in. The British 6th jumped on the other side of the island at the same time we did. And they had problems because they were using American gliders and their pilots were really not used to it.
Oh, boy. So heavier casualties than expected.
Yeah, they had glider casualties. But intactly, I think that it was a pretty
It went.
low casualty rate considering what they did.
Now, Bob, correct me, but I would assume paratroopers are basically shock troops, and as soon as you've kind of landed and gotten the situation, that you would be withdrawn and the infantry would come in. So that's not what really happens.
No, you start to fight as an infantryman.
You just keep going right ahead then.
Yeah, when you go into combat, you go in with 6 days rations, 6 days munitions, because your supply bags are all with you. And it's hit or miss after that, really, because if you haven't done it in 6 days,
then
you're in trouble.
All right, so then if you'll just continue then.
Well, we fought our way across Sicily. We were pretty fortunate, my battalion anyway, and
increasing surrenders by the other side?
surrenders and increasing artillery duels. But by then, Patton was on the island, Montgomery was on the island, and we had tank armor support and everything else.
How were the people? They greeting you as liberators, or?
The Germans scared the hell out of them. They told them that we were all convicts let out of jail, that were coming to murder them and rape their women and everything else.
So they were frightened?
They were frightened, and don't forget, in Sicily, everybody has a gun. Everybody has a gun.
We'll move
they
on
carry
from that.
shotguns. It's
We'll
unreal.
We'll move from that. Mentioning General Patton, did you ever see him personally?
Oh, yeah. We were attached to his army quite a number of times.
2 questions. One, when you hear of whether it's a movie star or a president, we all have images. And so when you first saw General Patton, even at whatever distance, was physically is that what you expected? I mean, was
He's a tough SOB. In plain English, he was.
He was.
He was.
No ifs, ands, buts.
No ifs, ands, buts. You were there to do a job. If you didn't do it, your butt was his.
This is how he's been portrayed historically.
He was the richest officer in the United States Army. He was a millionaire.
And he did carry the double pearl handle?
2 pearl handle guns. His helmet was polished. His stars were polished. Every officer had a painted insignia on their helmets, and it was dope. He made sure you saw him.
And he wore a riding habit, didn't he? I mean,
Yeah, he wore the
boots.
Well, he was a cavalry officer before he became an armored man. And
all right. My father, 94th Division, Battle of the Bulge, had no use for General Patton. All right, what about yourself, Bob? I mean, your impression, as a soldier, this is a great general, or boy, geez.
We came up from southern France at the Bulge, getting way ahead of ourselves. And we were in summer uniforms because we were getting ready to go home when the Bulge started. We were coming back to the States to go to the Pacific. And there he was. When the trucks pulled up, he was standing right there on top of the hill where everybody could see him. In the bitter cold, with his Mackinaw on, not a heavy coat like we were given. I mean...
So you respected him?
I respected him,
yeah. And
I think if we would have listened to him, we would have saved God knows how many trillions of dollars that we spent on the Cold War. Because that was the time.
Now, I'm going to use different language here, but I think you'll know what I'm saying. Supposedly, he had a picture of himself taken when he got to the Rhine, in which he kind of relieved his kidneys. Did you ever hear that story?
I heard it, but never saw it.
I've never seen anyone have a picture of that.
I heard it, but never saw it.
That story's gone off. Now, let's get back to your involvement.
We, of course, were given orders that we were supposed to slow down, because Montgomery was supposed to take Palermo.
Which is still in Sicily. I mean, which is
on the northeastern side of Sicily. We beat him into Palermo. Patton made up his mind. He was moving. He wasn't staying still. And I think that more or less got him in trouble right down the line.
Now,
besides his mouth.
I know you don't have any great love for General Montgomery.
No.
Why?
Well, this goes back...
The British general.
Yeah, that goes back to the Battle of the Bulge. When we came up from southern France, the 101st was completely encircled at Bastogne.
And we'll go into detail on that.
And, of course, General Gavin was already the division commander. He was a 2-star general at the time at the Bulge. So you can picture how he had risen. From Sicily, he made brigadier general, to Normandy, where he made a division commander, a 2-star general. Well, when we came up to outside of Bastogne, we opened a corridor 250 yards wide by 5 miles long. And we kept the corridor open, but back at the CP, I was on guard duty.
CP is
command post. I was on guard duty at the command post that night when the general came in.
This is General?
Gavin.
Right.
And he was in there scouring the maps and seeing what he had to do to keep the corridor open, because no aerial supply, no ammunition coming in, foggy, snowing. The Germans were crisscrossing our lines.
Now, just so everyone understands, this is in Belgium, and this is much beyond Sicily.
This is December 44.
Right, and this is...
The Germans were crisscrossing our lines, and everybody was like panicking, because they knew our passwords, they knew everything. Until, of course, you had a lot of American Indians in our outfit. And so we gave them the communication network to operate, and they were talking in Seminole or Cherokee or Sioux or whatever language that they spoke. And that blunted the Germans from crisscrossing and learning anything else. But Montgomery said it was an untenable position, and he told Gavin to close the pocket and wipe out.
To leave the people there.
To leave the 101st there, that would get wiped out or taken prisoner.
And this was at, what's the town?
Bastogne, right outside of Bastogne.
And that's in Belgium?
In Belgium.
In Belgium.
Yeah.
Well,
north of the Black Forest.
So you just...
And
you felt
Gavin told him point blank, and I heard him say it. he said, I don't think I'm going to close the pocket. And Montgomery said, I'm giving you a direct order. And Gavin told him, he said, if these were British troops, would you close the pocket? And Montgomery stormed out, and Gavin said, let's keep supplying them as long as we can.
And you heard this with your own ears.
My own ears.
Now, it'd be interesting, because I know you have history, and I know you're very involved in history. What has been recorded of that conversation? I bet you were interested to see what the historians have said, or is there no, there is no, you know, some historian.
But Gavin never rose higher.
Yeah, and it is, isn't that interesting?
Montgomery was Eisenhower's pet. Ridgway became a 4-star general, commanded the 8th Army in Korea, was the Army Chief of Staff. Gavin was a West Pointer. You just don't take a West Pointer and shunt him.
And
that's the proof
that
Montgomery's talking to, because everything Montgomery came up, Eisenhower did.
Well, let's get back to the poor little fellow. Have you made corporal yet?
No.
Poor private, or PFC.
Still a PFC.
So after the Sicily campaign,
we were moved, we were moved into the northern part of Sicily because Anzio had started.
Which is
They
a
had
campaign
invaded,
in Italy.
Right, the campaign in Italy, and they were having problems. And they got ready to drop us in Naples. And that was the second jump. I'm just trying to think what month it was.
Our people were kind of pinned down on the beaches of Anzio for a long time. It was very difficult for us.
The 504th was in Anzio, and they were getting the hell shot out of them. Because they never really jumped into Anzio. We jumped into Naples, and...
Let's go into that a little bit then, Bob. Anzio is below Naples.
Yeah. Right,
and your thing was to kind of take the pressure off.
Take the pressure off the pocket of the beach.
Right, so when you jumped you didn't jump in the outskirts of Naples, I assume.
We jumped on the outskirts of Naples.
All right, that sounds like a very dangerous thing to do. The Germans were fighting very...
A lot of broken bones on that.
And also, I got kind of the impression the Germans were almost desperate at this time to stop the invasion, or...
They knew we were there. They were looking to get us off the beach. If they could have broken the beach pocket, that was it. It would have meant trying to start all over again someplace else. Then when we landed in Naples, this frustrated them. They didn't know which way to go. They didn't know where the next stop was going to be.
What happened in Naples? Very fierce fighting, or did...
No, it was cutting the roads where they couldn't get supplies there. We cut the roads completely, and we got a presidential citation
I would
for
think
that.
Would be so the Germans obviously in time withdrew
That's
from
right.
the beach.
They were finished.
They were done.
They were finished.
Did they go kind of directly north of Naples after that, or just a long drawn out affair?
They fought their way. You know, you had Monte Cassino and
that was
all
still
of that.
coming. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
We weren't involved in that.
But there, I know.
Yeah, because I guess it was getting... This was near the end of '43, so they flew us. Certain part of us, cadre, would take a nap. We were flown back after they reached Naples, the American Army.
And you were withdrawn.
We were withdrawn, and we got ready. We were sent to England to get ready for Normandy.
And how did you fly to England?
I flew. I was part of the cadre.
And then I assume you went from Italy to North Africa, and then up. Is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would assume this was the way. Now you're in England. Did you get to leave at all? Any kind of a little break to...
Oh, yeah, well, we were going to, but we first had to set up where we were going to be. At that point, I was already a corporal.
Oh, you made the big...
Yeah, I made the big one. I was already a corporal.
And you did get some leave?
Yeah, we got leave. We were stationed outside of Sherwood Forest, broken with mines, in the village of Nottingham and Loughborough.
You really were?
That's right.
Is there a real forest there?
There's a forest there.
There's still a forest.
There's a forest there. The town of Loughborough and Nottingham were like sister cities, maybe 3 miles apart, something like that. Real nice.
So did you get a little respite?
Yeah. Of course, we went to London and raised hell and got in trouble,
but that's...
like everybody else. and they took us back to camp, no leaves until everything is set up, and by then parts of the division were starting to come in by boat.
Getting ready for the June 6th
right.
invasion of...
This was already January 44.
Getting ready for the June invasion.
Getting ready for Normandy.
While you were there in England, practice jumps and all that sort of thing.
They had the ground laid out in Scotland exactly like the beach and the towns would be in France. They built things that were unreal.
Any German air raids at the time when you were there, or the Germans pretty much were...
The Germans were pretty, we had command of the year, but you had the V2 bombings then.
Were they starting already then?
They were there.
In January,
The V2.
they were already starting at this time.
You had the V2, them things never knew where they were just like the Scud missiles.
Yeah, just
They didn't know where they were going to go.
more of I'll say, terror weapon against civilians.
That's right, that's what it was. I saw London one night after the firebomb raid. That was unreal. I can't believe all the fires that it started. Not really enough casualties to make up for all of the damage that it did. But I think it built the backbone up of the British people so high that no matter what, they were going to win.
Yeah,
Most of the kids were out of the area. They had shipped them all out of the area, to Canada, to the United States, wherever.
all right, now get us ready for the invasion and so on. So there were again a million rumors.
The million rumors until we started to see the sand traps, which is a bench with a whole table display. You got mounds of sand, and then they put certain things down to show you,
And you could see
this is where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and everything else. And they built the village that we were going to jump into exactly the way it was, with the church steeple in the middle of the town.
Really?
And that's where the Germans shot the paratroopers down.
Who were coming down by
they were coming
parachute.
down by
They were
parachute.
being shot then.
They were being shot
All
down.
right, what was the town that you landed?
Epinal, St. Mary Glees,
How far inland was that?
about 50 miles inland,
That's a long way.
a long way.
That's a very long way.
Well, the American flag was flying in St. Mary Glees before the troops hit the beach.
Is that right?
That's
Is
right.
that right? Bob, so the day, now you're ready to go, if you don't mind, we're all set. Everybody knew this was it. This was
it. We knew where we were going. We were told, we knew for 10 days before, no leaves, no passes, everything is restricted to the area. We missed one because of the weather. They switched it for a couple of days delay. They were depending on high tides. That's what they were depending on for the invasion by boats.
High tides?
High tides.
Would it be beneficial?
That's right, because they were going to float the piers in that they had hoped that they wouldn't have to hit the water with all the boats that were coming in, the LCIs and the LSTs.
All right, you took off at what time?
Well, I was in a Pathfinders.
Now, what's that?
That's the lead radar team for the division. I took off at
I
midnight.
thought they told you never to volunteer for anything.
I didn't volunteer.
Oh, you
for
didn't
that.
volunteer for
I did
that?
not volunteer. But at this time, I was a buck sergeant. I was a communication sergeant for my company. And
There it is.
that was it. It was written in blood. I was on a Pathfinders. We set the beeper up on the ground in the drop zone where we dropped. That the Air Force screwed up again.
Now, the beeper...
The beeper was a homing signal to the lead planes flying in.
So they would be as
So
sure
that
as
they
possible.
would know exactly when it went from beep, 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 beep to bop, 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 bop. At bop, 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 they were supposed to jump.
Well,
But they jumped them all over creation.
nerves, do you think, were just...
I don't know. I
Oh,
think
wow.
inexperienced pilots, fear, because you never saw so many planes in your life in one night or one morning like we had that day.
So you're getting ready to... What time did you take off from England?
Well, I was at the airfield at 8 o'clock at night, and we took off at, I guess it was 11:30, 11:45, and I was in France at 1:15.
All right, in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
really, in the middle of the night.
Yeah, my team jumped, and we spread out.
Right. before we do, I assume that there wasn't any German anti-aircraft fire at you at this moment.
At this moment,
At
there
this
was
moment.
nothing. We
No
were
fighters,
fooling
no
them.
nothing.
We were dropping the little rubber dolls with parachutes and everything else.
What's this, little rubber dolls?
You didn't hear that?
I don't know anything about little rubber dolls.
Well, they had manufactured thousands of little rubber soldiers and dropped them by parachute. So, and when they landed on the ground, the firecrackers in there and the dolls started to fire. The Germans didn't know whether to hit or go blind.
Oh, all right. So obviously the decoys.
It was
I didn't know- And they
decoys.
sent thousands of those things?
Thousands of them. Thousands of them were all over the place.
This is the first time I'm embarrassed, but I just had not heard that, really. I mean,
Yeah.
all right. So there you go, and you jump. Now, in your own personal jump, did you get near where you were supposed to have
Yeah,
been?
I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
Okay. And the rest of your people, no, was from that point?
My squad,
Was
my
together.
my radio operators were all in the same area, and that's when we broke
Now,
off to go.
I know you had made other jumps in combat, but with this big, I think I would have been so scared.
600 feet.
What?
600 feet.
600 feet in the middle of the night? And in addition, once you're down, and I would have been scared out of my liver 50 miles inland, the enemy all around, and they knowing that this is it too.
I don't think
must
they
have-
realized it.
At that moment, they didn't
At that-
realize what had
They
hit them
didn't
yet.
realize it
What did
until at daybreak when they saw the invasion. We disrupted communications completely, but we were screwed up
All right.
because we were dropped all over eternity.
So what was your, was your...
My job
Your
was
job-
strictly to get the beepers set up, put down the panels for daytime for aerial supply.
Now, panels meant
The
what?
panels were in certain fields on certain drop zones. You had a red arrow pointing in the direction we wanted the drop, plus the area that we actually wanted the stuff. Like we had 3 dots and 2 dashes as a code signal to the aircraft flying, warning him that he was coming up on the panels. The panels were fluorescent type of panels. Did you see at Desert Storm where some of the tanks had fluorescent orange panels on? That's
Okay.
what they learned in Normandy.
All right. Now, when did you run into the resistance?
Germans?
Yeah.
We ran into the Germans, I guess it must have been about 8 o'clock in the morning, because they were starting to come north. But we had so many men on the ground, and we had 3 airborne divisions on the ground already. And you're talking
Already thousands.
50,000 men, at
Already.
least, on the ground. We had the British, and the 101st, and the 82nd
You had the
on the
whole...
ground.
yeah.
We were there.
How big was that town? Was it,
St. Mary Glees, I would say it was a town of about 12 to 15,000 people. The Germans were in there, though. They were holding anti-airborne maneuvers. That was a problem. They had flooded the fields, and you had like 2 foot of water, 3 foot of water in some of the fields.
In other words, they
Some of the
immediately, when
guys
they knew it
coming
came,
down
they began to flood the
Drowned.
fields.
Some of the
They
guys
did.
drowned, yeah.
French resistance?
Very good, very helpful,
They were.
very helpful.
I would think with information
Yeah,
and so on.
very helpful. They took us through lined areas when we were fighting to get back to rejoin our outfits. Because like I said, we were spread all over creation. You had a battalion here of this regiment and a battalion there, and you had a regiment in the middle of a different regiment.
So it was, you know,
You know, it was
Very
all
confused.
snafu.
My memory of the readings and everything I've taken, that the fighting on the beaches was
Horrible.
very horrible, delayed, and here you people are, they're waiting for them to come.
Yeah.
When did you finally make contact with the advancing Allied troops? In other words, when did you
I
join
guess
up?
about 2 days later.
All right, and I'm thinking the 50 miles and
Yeah,
and very,
2
very
days, 3
difficult.
days later, they started to come back. But we were moving back towards the beach.
Yeah, to try to
We
to
had
make
booby
contact.
trapped every road where any kind of reinforcements could come up. Logs were down, everything was demolition set, timing devices, we blew bridges, they were caught. Whatever harassment that we could do, we did. And that's where all our specialized training came in. Every man could plant a demolition charge and not have to worry, because every man had C4 or C5 or C9 with him.
Those are the mines.
No,
No, these are-
plastic.
Oh, the plastic,
Plastic.
they're already in it.
Yeah.
All right, now you're back, I mean, no, but you've joined up.
We've
with the
joined
basic-
up, and now we start to fight.
And the fighting across France
The
was
fighting
horrible.
across France. We've moved too fast in some areas and not fast enough in other areas. We had the toughest area to fight in. The British more or less had a tough area, but it was much easier because Hitler was stupid, more or less. He never released the tanks.
His
His
panzers?
panzers, he never released them to fight. He thought that the invasion was going to come someplace else.
And
He never really released them all to fight, so what they were fighting with was what they had on hand.
which,
Was good for us. And that's when
but
Patton...
still very
Yeah,
difficult.
but Patton was breaking out. He was moving faster than his supply lines.
This is what I had heard, that he just,
Yeah, he moved faster than his supply lines. See, when we jumped, we were part of the 18th Airborne Corps, 1st Allied Airborne Army. Because with all the airborne divisions now, we now became an army of our own. So they took the 82nd and attached us to the 7th Corps. I think General Bradley was the commander of the 7th Corps at the time.
who was a very famous tank
Omar.
commander?
Omar Bradley,
Omar Bradley.
who was the division commander of the 82nd before it became an airborne
And he
division.
became a five-star general.
He became a 5-star general.
Did you ever get to Paris during all this?
I didn't get to Paris until after.
Afterwards, all right. In other words, you people went north.
We went north
went
and
north.
then turned east.
All right. When you finally ran into, we'll say, frontline German troops, what did they, was there a particular German division that you had to, in other words, they're going to try to stop the paratroopers.
The SS.
eventually. They sent the SS in?
The SS troops, well, they had all different kind of SS. The black uniformed SS were the Gestapo SS. The Waffen SS were regular German army units, except their insignia was a skull on their hats, and the SS insignia on their lapels.
Tough as we hear, or just all
Very
propaganda?
tough fighters.
Tough fighters.
Very tough
Very
fighters.
difficult. Yeah.
Well, you know, they were the super race. They
And
were
all
taught
that.
from kids on.
And all that, yeah.
All that jazz.
They believe their own.
Yeah, they believed their own Dr.
Because-
Goebbels.
Now, would you help me though, Bob? I would assume, and that they would throw the very toughest they had against the paratroopers.
Well,
Or was it just wherever
it
the
was
positions
wherever
were?
the positions
Wherever the
were.
positions
Don't
were, they would-
forget, they kept maneuvering us back and forth in the lines. As
Hmm.
they found a hard spot, another division would be moved into a hard spot, and they reinforced with another division. Don't forget, 3 weeks into July, more or less, they were going to relieve all the airborne troops and take us back to England, because we were in the front lines there from June 6th up to July 14th or thereabouts.
Which is a very long time.
It was a long time in the
Very-
line with
very-
no relief. So what they did was they took us back, and we went back to England, and right away we started to prepare for the Holland invasion. That was a General Montgomery plan. How he did it, I'll never know.
All right.
But
So
that-
now, when did that
that's
jump come?
September the 19th, 1944.
We're doing this tape one day off of the anniversary. We're doing this on the 20th of the. All right. Now you're a sergeant now.
Yeah, I'm a
And-
buck,
no,
buck sergeant.
When you knew you were going to Holland finally, right?
Yeah.
You knew you were going to Holland. Now, did you have any concept about at the time that this was going to be a real snafu, or you, in other words, you don't know on that level?
We didn't know.
You didn't
We
know.
just saw the sand traps, and when they showed us the area that we were going into, we weren't too bad off. My division was going to Nijmegen.
All right. Now, help me out. Is that in Belgium or is that?
That's in Holland.
That's in Holland. Excuse
All
me.
in Holland.
All in Holland.
All in Holland. And
near the Belgian border, or?
yeah, it's near the Belgian and German border.
So it's quite inland in Holland?
Yeah.
All right, and where was the nearest Allied troops, as near as you know?
Well, we were dropped in Nijmegen. The 101st was dropped at Oosterbeek, and the British were dropped the furthest bridge away. There were 6 bridges, and we had to take all 6 bridges.
And then they were to blow up these bridges?
No, we were to keep the bridges open so that they would lead us into Germany.
All right.
That was the pathway for the tanks to get into Germany.
And where were the tanks, how far away were the Allied lines to get there?
Well,
Again,
supposedly they were supposed to reach us in 3 days.
And these were British?
British,
They were
British and
They were
Canadian.
coming up through Belgium and
Yeah.
Holland, that was their sector.
This was catastrophe out of sorts for every unit that was in Holland.
Right, I mean, I'm not an armchair strategist at all. Was it a snafu, or just so much German resistance, or just?
The German resistance was fierce where the British were. We had taken our areas because the disruption of what we did was no problem.
You held the bridges?
We
then?
held the bridges.
You held the bridges?
The whole problem was they picked out a road, one road,
Who's they?
Montgomery,
Okay, oh, the commanders.
the
then.
commanders,
Okay.
picked out this operation this way, and they came up through the fields that were all flooded.
Now, who's they again that came up through the fields?
The tanks that were supposed to relieve us.
Oh, okay.
The British tanks and the Canadian tanks.
Right.
And they stopped for tea at 10 o'clock in the morning. They stopped for
No,
tea
did
at
they
2
really?
o'clock. Yeah.
Did they really? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm being
You could
facetious
see
at
the
all.
tanks.
You could see the tanks?
You could see the tanks 10 miles away. There was no buildings in front of you.
And
It
they
took them
stopped.
6 days to get to us because the Germans started to shoot 88s at them,
No, those are
and they
the
couldn't
heavy
get off the
artillery.
road. So if they knocked out 2 tanks, the road was blocked. So they had to get a tank mover up there. And how did they get a tank mover up there on one road?
So
I mean-
very, very, very poor planning.
It was a catastrophe.
So then there you are with everybody else, and you people are kind of pinned down. You are pinned down.
We are pinned down, but
Then
we're
what?
fighting our way.
You're trying to get to the Allied lines now?
No, we're
Still
staying
holding the
there to
bridges.
hold this because we're supposed to hold this bridge open, and all the bridges in a line are supposed to be held open so that it'll lead us into Germany.
Right. And the Germans are not fools, and they realize this,
That's
obviously,
right.
you know.
They were sending everything up
Yeah,
that they had that could
To
shoot.
take those bridges. you
That's
know.
right. That was
Yeah.
the bad part of it.
So what came out of this bomb?
A complete waste.
That's, you know.
A complete waste.
Did the tanks ever arrive?
Yeah. 6 days late.
6 days late. All right, and,
The British Airborne Division was wiped out.
yeah, they,
The Polish Airborne Brigade was wiped out. I guess, well, we didn't lose so much in dead as we did in wounded and PWs.
oh, and a lot of,
PWs.
yeah,
And the 101st, I imagine, had the same
same
thing.
Now, so finally they're there and so on. When were you pulled out of the line to?
We were pulled back out of the lines, and we were sent back into France the first week in October. And all of a sudden, we were out on a parade ground, and they moved us out on a parade ground one day by 4 o'clock in the morning, and they reviewed us, gave out decorations. At that time, they gave out 2 or 3 Congressional Medal of Honors to my division. God knows how many Distinguished Service Crosses and Silver Stars, and all the Purple Hearts and everything else. And that's when General Gavin told us that we were going into southern France, that we were being chosen to go back home for a 30-day furlough, because to that point we almost had more time in the front lines than any other American division. And we were going to go to the South Pacific.
And what happened?
Well, we were in southern France,
Getting ready to.
getting ready.
To
No
leave the
equipment.
European,
Yeah, no
yeah.
equipment. No, nothing. I guess they were gathering the boats for us or whatever. And all of a sudden, we're into December, and the German breakthrough.
1944.
Yeah, and the German breakthrough started in Belgium.
The Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah, von Rundstedt.
Might come to your mind about having to go back into action, but tell us, now you got the call, where did you go and what happened?
Well,
The Battle of the Bulge.
they load us on trucks in summer uniforms, no coats, just a light field jacket, no weapons, summer underwear, summer socks. And we started to move. And as we got to some of the big cities,
And we're talking January now, or December
December.
yet? December yet.
December.
All right.
and as we're moving up to the Bulge, up to Bastogne, at each stop they started to give us little pieces of equipment. Winter gear, the wool knit hat, and gloves, and everything else. So that by the time we got up into northern part there where it was snowing in winter time, we already had winter uniforms, no weapons. They gave us, when we got off the trucks, about 10 miles or 12 miles from Bastogne, where we were going to start to walk up to the lines, they gave us brand new weapons in cosmoline.
Now, tell us what that is.
Cosmoline is protective grease that they use to protect the weapon.
Now, we're both kind of laughing because it's about 40 feet thick. No, but it's
It is
awful.
thick. And we said, how are we going to clean them? They said, fire them.
Oh, no. Is that one?
That's right. We couldn't clean them. We had to fire them.
Oh.
And they were stiff because it was 15 degrees, 10 degrees. But once you started to fire them, you know, the bolt and all of the barrel cleaned out, but the trigger guard, you had to,
What a mess.
well, that night, we pulled the trigger guards out and just dipped them in the mess kit water and cleaned them off. Told them to get new barrels.
For those people who are not that familiar with the Battle of the Bulge, and no one is except they were there, if I may, my father was a postal clerk in England, 38 years old, and he ended up a machine gunner there. So it was a very desperate situation.
Yeah, we could have lost the war. We could have lost the war if von Rundstedt had gotten more support from Hitler.
And really had broken.
That's right, he
really
could have broke
opened.
through and encircled us. Well, maybe not lost the war, but it would have
Delayed
lasted
it.
2 more years.
And Hitler was already with the V1, V2.
That's
We
right.
didn't know where the
Yeah.
atomic thing was, so it was
And
serious business.
he was already making the heavy water
Yes,
in
he
Norway.
was, up in north. Now,
Yeah.
so there you are, and you've at least got these rifles and some type of
Yeah.
water. Now, what then
Well,
occurred?
we went into battle, and we opened up a pocket, and like I said, the Germans crisscrossed our lines. They were wearing American uniforms and knew every password.
And I'm going to say there's the endless story that supposedly that they pretty much knew USA jargon, and yet people would ask them
They
passwords.
didn't.
They didn't. All right, go
They
ahead.
didn't.
People were asking them, who's Mickey Mouse? And they
That's
wouldn't know.
right, they didn't know. If you asked the guy when he was crossing the line, how come Babe Ruth didn't hit that home run yesterday? And they looked at you and they said, Babe Ruth hit home runs. Yeah, but Babe Ruth wasn't hitting home runs anymore. So you knew. Or else, at the time, I think we started to talk about John Wayne and Stagecoach.
Which was, of course, a movie.
That's right. And they didn't know nothing.
No.
Well, we said, what was the name of his horse? We didn't know the name
No,
of
of
his
course.
horse.
I understand they even had some captured American equipment, like
Yes.
Jeeps and things like
Well,
this.
The outfit that I took basic training in at Fort Jackson was wiped out at the Bulge. The 106th Infantry Division was completely wiped out at the Bulge. It was in the line 6 days, a novice division, quiet hard. Their 3 regiments were completely decimated. I lost a cousin there. And he was missing in action and finally just declared dead. And that was it. We never found his body or anything.
Now you're, again, back to your world.
That's
Did you,
right.
where did you get into the combat with the Germans at that moment, or were you helping bring up supplies, or where were you personally at the
Well,
moment?
I was on CP guard, which was
What
not
command post?
command post guard, because my company was now more or less the battalion headquarters company. It wasn't battalion headquarters because it was still G Company, but battalion headquarters had been decimated when we first got up into the Bulge, so that my company automatically took over that function. The first sergeant had been wounded, and seriously wounded, and strange as it seems, they took a 21-year-old buck sergeant and promoted him to first sergeant, which was me. And I guess I was stymied for the first time in my life, speechless more or less, not knowing what to say. Because, well, the 3 tech sergeants in the company, they didn't want any part of it.
And so you took the responsibility?
So I took the responsibility because I was in the company headquarters part, and that was it.
The books say, very foggy, we couldn't get our
no aerial support.
No aerial support at all.
No.
And how long did the Battle of the Bulge last?
Last, per se, I guess about a week,
About a week.
8 days, 9 days, maybe tops.
And then
the weather broke,
and that was
the end. As soon as the weather broke and we started to get aerial supply, it was the end of the Germans.
It must have been something for you to see those planes coming over.
Oh boy.
It must have been a moment of...
That's right, because we were running short on bazooka ammunition and everything else. I mean, and bazookas were the only thing at that time that we could fight the German tanks with, and their Tiger tanks.
I was going to say, they had brought in their finest, latest equipment.
Their Tiger tanks, we had to go to knock the treads off.
Is that?
Because we couldn't fight their armor, we couldn't fight their guns. Their guns had, everybody talks about the 88. Well, there's nothing like a 220 millimeter cannon on a tank to knock your socks off when it fires.
With the Germans defeated there,
we pushed into Germany.
And then it was to the Rhine.
That's right.
And then crossing the Rhine. I mean, there was many, many battles, of course.
We moved back into France.
How did you feel personally when you saw the Rhine? We have to, of course, watch our language, but I mean, did you have any feelings, or maybe it wouldn't even be that type of feeling?
I said, God damn it, we fought for all of this, and it's nothing but a muddy river. And then we kept getting ready to jump. We were supposed to jump there.
Into Germany.
Into Germany, and every time we jumped, Patton moved that much further. And his support troops kept moving that much further. So they kept pulling the jump off. And every time we got ready to jump the next day, he was still further. Finally, they said, no, he's too far in, we're going to blood another division. So they blooded the...
Now, what's that mean?
Well, they were going to let the 13th Airborne get its first combat experience in a drop. So they were the ones that dropped on the Rhine.
All right. Well, is that the bridge and all that sort of thing where they had all the... bridge was...
the bridge over the Rhine.
Which the Germans had failed to blow up.
They tried.
That's what I understand.
It didn't work.
It didn't work.
Didn't work.
And so there was the passageway.
That's right. The passageway came. We were moved back into France, and we were made Army Reserve. We were the reserve division of the Army that we were attached to.
All right. Where did you finally, where were you at the end of the war?
Well, we had crossed the Elbe. We were the reserve battalion of
you were all the way. Oh, you were all the way to meet the Russians?
Yeah, we met the Russians.
All right. Did you meet any Russians personally, Bob?
Oh yeah.
All the news had people dancing and joyfully. Was your meeting with them?
Yeah. We danced. We drank. They had women soldiers there, which was
and you fraternized a little
and we
bit.
Fraternized. But then when we withdrew across the Elbe that night, we heard clanking of tracks and bulldozers working. And that more or less was the beginning of the Cold War. Because when we woke up in the morning, we were not allowed to cross the Elbe River again. We had tanks facing us, machine guns and artillery.
And the Russians so the joyful moment lasted a day or two. Or
that's right. And
just a day or two.
Yeah.
And then...
And when we crossed the Elbe River, this is the saddest part of my story, I guess. We were in a buffalo that crossed the Elbe River. We were 24.
A buffalo?
A water buffalo. It's a tracked vehicle that goes
into the water
bank. Yeah. And I lost my best friend that day. The SS were firing AP shells at us.
And then what's AP?
An armor-piercing shell at personnel. which didn't make sense. It doesn't detonate or explode to Maine, but this was all they had. The shell hit the Buffalo, ricocheted around in it, and of the 24 of us that were in it, only 3 of us walked out alive. And
No, terrible. When the Germans surrendered, where were you, Bob?
I guess we were about 50 miles across the Elbe River, going towards Germany. We were part of Patton's army.
Okay.
And if given his choice, we would have rolled on through Poland into Russia.
All right. Now, when the surrender came,
We had to move back.
You had
Because
to
this
move
was
back.
the deal that was made with the Russians.
well, you had to go back to the
The American
Elbe,
side.
the American side of the Elbe.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone wanted to go home. I mean, when it finally ended, I assume.
Yeah.
Yes. How
Everybody.
long before? Let's see. Now the war ended. Oh goodness.
May 1945. VE Day was August of 45. They started to ship our units home, I guess, the first week of June.
We're getting ready for Asia, you think?
No, that was it.
That was it.
We were going to be the occupation now. We were going to Berlin.
Oh, you were going to Berlin.
We
You were
went
going
to
to be the
Berlin.
occupation.
Yeah, we went to Berlin. And that's where they made up their mind that the 82nd was going to parade down Fifth Avenue. And
No, I'm a little confused now. Germany has collapsed in
collapsed
May
completely.
6th, if I remember
Right.
correctly,
Wow.
or there in that area. And now you're going to be the occupation.
The occupation of Berlin, the 82nd
Occupation.
Airborne.
All right. And were you?
Yeah.
I mean, the 82nd was the
This-
occupation.
The Second Armored was in Berlin already.
Right.
They withdrew the Second Armored Division and they sent us into Berlin. And at that point, they made up their minds that the 82nd was going to parade down Fifth Avenue. So they started to pull all the combat veterans out of the unit and bring in recruits from all the others and everything. And more or less, as the lowest ranking in time, per se, first grader, I had to go to the 508. And I was transferred out of the 505 to the 508. I moved back to Frankfurt, and as a first sergeant, I had a chance to become the instructor of what I went through in the States at the parachute school, because I became the first sergeant at parachute school to start to train replacements for every man who had been in an airborne unit in combat. And I guess that's the story.
Well, no, it isn't. Now, there you are in Frankfurt. Did the 82nd parade
In
in
Fifth Avenue,
Fifth Avenue?
in New York City.
But you were still in Germany.
I was in Germany.
You were in Germany, so you must. I'm sure you've seen the newsreels of all that.
Oh, sure.
And of course, some of the people you must have been kind of a, I don't know what moment, a moment in your life.
Proud.
A proud moment in your life.
Yeah.
All right.